Hi guys, Bobby Gass here. This is going to be story time about a concert that I've been to a lot of them, and we'll start it off right now.
Be fun to do.
Right in the middle of all this, somebody throws a chicken on stage.
I see Alice holding a chicken. He's gonna throw it out. I go, that thing is never going to fly.
A chicken's a bird. This is all my logic is working. The bird's got feathers. It'll fly away.
Well, it did.
And the chicken goes right back into the front row. And the audience tears it to pieces and throws it back on stage, parts of it.
And gave him this huge standing ovation. The place went wild.
Who doesn't know about Alice Cooper, the king of shock rock, a true rock and roll pioneer, and at the time, the ultimate juvenile delinquent? He also just happens to be a devout Christian, an avid golfer, and a reformed alcoholic. But to truly appreciate his genius, think about what music was like when he hit the scene in the late 60s, right? It was all that flower power, peace and love, hippy-dippy crap. And then Alice hit the stage and wow, he turned all that upside down. The guy had a woman's name, dressed in women's clothing. He wore makeup. His shows had mock murders and hangings and beheadings. He invented rock and roll theater. He had his big scandalous moments, right? You may recall the killing a chicken on stage, which he didn't do, but it sure made him famous. And in the 1970s, Alice's career exploded. And you know how middle America, right? They freaked. He was the poster boy for evil, every parent's worst nightmare.
So do you still do that on stage now when you go on tour? Do you still like hack things apart and cut your head off?
No. First of all, I never killed a chicken.
Right.
You know,
Okay.
I never
Let's get that straight.
Let's get
now.
that straight.
Before we get the chicken
Never
people
killed
calling
a
us.
chicken. But the story is even more bizarre than that, because if you think of this, there I'm on stage and I'm playing between John Lennon and the Doors. It was 70,000 people out there.
And they didn't have any foul with them at all. No chickens,
They
no
didn't
poultry.
bring anything,
Right.
which I thought was a little bit rude, really. You know?
John Lennon was always like that. He never brought any livestock to any of his shows. What's that about? And now he's a legend.
So they're on this side, and they're on this side, and we're doing this last song. And in the last song, I used to open up a feather pillow, which would fill this room easily, one pillow.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, there's this chicken on the stage. Now, first of all, it didn't strike me right then. Okay, here's a kid getting ready to come to the concert. He said, okay, I got my tickets, I got my keys, I got my chicken. I got my...
Did the chicken have a ticket?
Who would bring a chicken to the show?
I don't know.
To start with. So
Another chicken, I guess.
They throw the chicken on stage, and being from Detroit, never being on a farm in my life, it had feathers, it had wings, it would fly. So I threw it back. And it didn't fly as much as it plummeted. And the audience tore the chicken apart.
God.
No, that's not the kicker, though. The kicker is the first 5 rows were all in wheelchairs. So afterwards I went, that's bizarre.
Yeah.
And then the next day, of course, it was in the paper, Alice Cooper kills chicken, and throw it out. And Frank Zappa called, he was producing me then. Frank's called, and he said, did you kill a chicken on stage last night? I said, I don't think so. And he said, well, don't deny it, they love it. You know?
That's rock and roll.
So
We've got to go, Alice. It's been great to
Now
meet
you
you.
hear Alice. Vincent Furnier is his real name. He changed his name in '75 because it would be worth more money to the guy. He says, you heard him say 70,000 fans at that concert watched him, right? No, that's not true. Don't believe his golf score either that he tells you. I've seen him swing a club. Of course, it was a long time ago. But anyhow, I looked it up because I heard him say 80,000. I heard him here in the he says 70,000, but I've heard him say 60,000 and 50,000, right? And I played football there for 2 years when I was in high school. There was a Grey Cup game there played too, quite a few years, a long time ago. But anyhow, I knew, so I looked it up what the capacity of Varsity Stadium was, and it's only 21,000 something, right? And maximum they had there, might have been 25,000. I don't think so, though. I think because when the field was more or less covered, You know, the top of the stands weren't full. I figure there was probably around 22,000, maybe a little more, but there certainly wasn't no 30,000 there. I mean, I've been to a lot of concerts, and I can judge crowds because I've been to some big ones and small ones too, right? And Alice was wrong. Let's get on with it. I got to tell you though, one thing about this concert, you know how everybody takes a lighter and goes like that at concerts? They do that, you know, in the dark concerts and crap like that. That started at this concert in '69. The announcer, I think it was Johnny Brower, who did, no, it couldn't have been Johnny, he didn't do announcing. He's the guy who did the gig and other gigs. He was a great producer of concerts and stuff like that. But the first time this was ever done at that concert, the guy who was doing the announcing, they were bringing in John Lennon and Yoko Ono in a limo, and I guess, you know, the rest of the guys in the Plastic Ono band. And actually, they opened up a back gate on the south side of the stadium, and who was it? The Vagabonds. It's a motorcycle club here. And they escorted right through the crowd, the motorcycles with a big long stretch limo, black limo. And, you know, the guy told everybody to light up the lighters to welcome John Lennon, you know, Peace Festival and all of that stuff. So we did. Well, I had a Zippo lighter is what I had. I didn't have a Bic lighter. But people were lighting matches and candles, and, you know, it's the hippie days, '69, the end of the hippie days. But let's get on with this here now. So he's full of shit. There was no 80,000, 70,000 people there.
I got a call from this guy who was putting together the Toronto Rock and Roll Revival. It was going to be the first time John Lennon was performing without the Beatles.
So if we can create some hope with this festival, maybe we could take it around the world.
They wanted my help organizing the festival.
And we'll give you 30% of the proceeds. He says, I don't want any money. He says, I want my band to play between John Lennon and the Doors at prime time.
My goal was to make this a place where Alice would shine.
60,000 people. We go on, and it's great. And we're tearing the place up, and the feathers are going. And I look down, and there's a chicken on stage. The only person that could have brought the chicken was Shep, because nobody in the audience would bring a chicken to that concert. Nobody would say, okay, I got my keys, I got my tickets, I got my chicken.
I thought, let's have a live chicken. It would be fantastic. I threw it out at him.
I took the chicken and tossed it thinking it had feathers, it should fly. Well, it didn't fly as much as it plummeted.
Everybody went wild.
The audience tore it to pieces.
They threw it back at him. They threw back wings and legs and heads, came flying back up on the stage. And then I saw blood. So I turned my head because I faint when I see blood.
Next day in the paper, Alice Cooper rips head off chicken and drinks the blood. What should have been incredibly horrible press for anybody became the thing that put us on the map.
Yeah, when Alice threw that chicken out there, I mean, I was covered in feathers. I was down front because I had gone down front earlier to see Lennon and, you know, Clapton and, you know, the band, right? I mean, you know, the Plastic Ono band. I wanted to get down front and have a look-see at him, right? So I was down pretty close. And when he tossed that chicken in there, it didn't land in the first, you know, he said there was 5 rows of wheelchairs. There wasn't. There was 1 row. There might have been maybe a dozen or 12 chairs there, right, wheelchairs. But everybody else was sitting down. Some people were, you know, standing up to see past them. And but the chicken landed about, I don't know, 8-10 feet to the left of me, and a couple of people grabbed it, and a big guy grabbed it and threw it back on stage. And then he fired it back out in the crowd again, close to me again. And people started ripping at it. And, you know, you could see blood and crap. And I'm covered in feathers, and all I want to do is get away from there. Right? So I started edging out to the side. And people were throwing crap back up on the stage. It was wild. Sometime in the end of this, I'll show you the whole 10 or 12 minute clips of it. You know, all of that crazy stuff, I wasn't used to that, and I didn't think much of it, think much of Alice Cooper's band at all, actually. You'll see what I mean when I play the last 10 or 12 minutes that they were on stage before the Doors come on. And it wasn't until 2 or 3 years later when I started liking Alice, but I seen him twice in '69. I don't know, the first 4 years, 70, 69, 70, 71, 72, I must have seen him at least a dozen times. Every concert he was at, it just seemed up here. Anyhow, let's get on with it again.
That was Mae West too, right?
Yeah, that was Mae West one time actually said, why don't you come over and see me some? And she really did come on to us. And
Did
I
you
said,
think about it?
Well, I thought for a second, I said, well, for one reason, you're 86. And another reason, I'm not sure if you're a woman.
But which one threw you off more? Because 86 is okay.
I think at 86, she would have been right there, but she also came on to Keith Moon that night and Ringo. She was trying to get everybody in her. She was something.
No kidding. Well, that voice is perfect.
Yeah.
The amount of people, because you were around in the time of the last great era of those guys, like the people that the kids still wear on their T-shirts today.
Right.
When you're in the moment, do you get a sense of what's happening? Do you know it's magic? Like you played with the Doors, and John Lennon, I believe in that night that Lennon played, Eric Clapton was with him on stage.
Right.
That's a hell of a lineup.
Well, that was a big deal for us. I mean, we were all Beatle fans. Everybody in the world at that time, Beatles were the end all, and the Stones were right there too. And of course, we knew the Doors from L.A., so we knew them. But John Lennon, it was still a very big deal. And playing between both of them, we look on either side of the stage, and there's Jim Morrison and the Doors, and John Lennon and his guys watching our show. And we're literally nobody at that time. Nobody had ever heard of us, yeah. So, I mean, that was the night that we actually made our stamp sort of on.
My dad was at that show. He was at that, and I remember when I was a little kid, he told me about that concert because I had an Alice Cooper record.
Yeah.
But it freaked my mother out. And I sort of laugh now. We've talked about this. My mother's a Christian. Is there any irony to the fact that Alice Cooper, that guy who terrified so many Christians, is a Christian now?
Well, no, I mean, my dad was a pastor. Yeah. My grandfather was an evangelist. My wife's father is a pastor. I grew up in a Christian home.
You teach Bible study.
And I teach I'm sort of a substitute teacher for Bible study on Wednesday mornings.
Yeah, it was quite the gig. I'll tell you who else was at this gig. My memory, I can't remember everybody, right? Who can, right? I mean, I do have a good memory, but it ain't perfect. And so I read an article on, someplace, and I copied down the list of the performers that were there, and I wrote a little bit later on. I'll read some of the people that I seen live at that gig, and another one that year. There was John Brower, who put on the gig at John Lennon's Peace Festival. He had one earlier. I think it was the middle of June, the end of June or something, called the Toronto Pop Festival. And that was pretty damn good too. A little later on, well, anyhow, that's the stadium, Varsity Stadium. It's held a lot of concerts. Notably, the 1969. This is the article. Notably, the 1969 Rock and Roll Revival concert, which Rolling Stone once called the second most important event in rock and roll history, and resulted in a documentary movie, Sweet Toronto, and John Lennon's live Peace in Toronto album. Quite a few bootlegs of that, more than I ever seen for any concert, come out of that too, right? The performers were the Doors, the Plastic Ono Band, Yoko Ono, and Eric Clapton with Klaus Voormann and Alan White. Alan White was a drummer for the Yes later, and Klaus Voormann was a bass player for Manfred Mann, and an artist guy. He used to do some albums for the Beatles, I think. Who else was there? Was Bo Diddley, Chicago Transit Authority. Later they called them, renamed Chicago. Tony Joe White, Polk Salad Annie, Tony Joe White, Rainy Night in Georgia, another one of his great songs. Alice Cooper, of course, so we'll get into Jerry Lee Lewis, Chuck Berry, Cat Mother and the All Night Newsboys. Well, they're calling them the All Stars. Oh no, the All Night Newsboys. Gene Vincent. He died a little later. Gene Vincent, about a year or two after this gig. There was Junior Walker and the All Stars. Shotgun. Little Richard, Doug Kershaw. Kershaw got more applause than anybody else. And man, was he coked up. But we loved him. He really tried to play to the audience and, the hippies. He's a country guy, Cajun guy, and we loved him. Screaming Lord Sutch, Nucleus. That's a jazz band, jazz rock band. Funny how I never see any of you guys from that are jazz fans and showing jazz rocks that ever show Nucleus, right? They were also at the concert they had in June earlier. Broward did, the Toronto Pop Festival. Nucleus was. Milkwood was there, and Whiskey Howl, two local bands, right? Kiss performed at the stadium too in '76. I seen them a couple of years earlier. The first time they were in Toronto at a burlesque theater, the Victory Burlesque Theater. Rush also performed there in their Permanent Waves tour, right? And that was in '79. I told you I've seen Rush, I don't know, all kinds of times, dozens of times before they ever cut a record. But they also, in the article, they didn't mention Fats Domino. And Fats was there too. Another one of John Broker's gigs was earlier that year in '69 at the same stadium. That was the Toronto Pop Festival, and the Velvet Underground was there, the band, Alice Cooper again, Carla Thomas, Johnny Winter, Sly and the Family Stone, the Bar-Kays, Eric Anderson, he was a folk singer, right? Eric Anderson. Jose Feliciano, he was hot for a couple of years, Jose. Rotary Connection, Blood, Sweat, and Tears. This is '69, Blood, Sweat, and Tears. The year before, in '68, Blood, Sweat, and Tears was the highest grossing band in all of rock and roll. Not the Beatles, not the Stones, not Jimi Hendrix. In '68, Blood, Sweat, and Tears made more money than anybody else. Concerts and record sales. Who else was there? Jose Feliciano, Blood, Sweat, and Chuck Berry. Yeah, Chuck was there. Dr. John, the Night Tripper. Al Cooper. Edwin Starr. Walked 25 miles. He had a couple of hits, Edwin Starr. Procol Harum. Steppenwolf. The incredible Slim Harpo. Blues band, Supreme Slim Harpo. Man, he was great. He died not long after, I don't know, 6-8 months, something like that. There were other groups there, but, you know, I don't remember them. Oh, yeah, Tiny Tim. He was there at that Toronto Pop Festival, too. Try Tiny Tim. I hear later, John Brower, he did Canada's Woodstock Festival. It was a 3-day affair. And it was called Strawberry Fields. It was up in Mosport Speedway, right? I was at that one too. Let's get into, let me show you Alice's, you know, his gig here. It's, I didn't think much of it. Believe me, I didn't. It took me a while to like Alice Cooper. A couple of years anyhow. I didn't like all of that running around and crap. I guess he was the, you know, shock rock guy. I guess he's the guy who started all of that sort of theatrics, well, for white guys, right? I don't know. Here you go.
and gentlemen. Alice Cooper, a group of the future. Alice Cooper.